You are listening to the voices of the Occultinarium. Now grab your brooms and let's take flight.
Hello and welcome to tonight's episode of the Occultinarium. We are the voices of the Occultinarium, and tonight's hosts are
Luigi,
Adriana,
Emily,
Lynn. Tonight we will bring you another one of our row of interviewing the hosts. And tonight's interviewee will be our beloved witch, Luigi.
yay!
Give it up for Luigi.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting one.
This
maybe.
shall be interesting.
Ooh.
Yes. Let's unravel. Let's see how much we can prod our little pagan witch.
Mysterious.
Let's go.
So I have the first question, and I was kind of thinking about what does Emily want to know about Luigi that she doesn't know, because she knows him quite not super well, because there's always mystery about everything. But I was really wondering, it is a pretty simple question, I think, because you connect with like goddesses and gods from so many different pantheons, and you're so knowledgeable with like different deities, different pantheons, and like spirituality and books. And I was thinking, like, if you would have to like choose one pantheon that is the closest to your heart,
Slender.
which one? No, but which I would love to know, like which one is the closest to your heart, and like why? Why would that be like the closest? I was just curious, really.
You would have to.
And I know
Luigi would have
this
to
is
go
a difficult
appease.
one. I know
appease
this is
the
a
gods
difficult
It's
one.
afterwards.
like asking to choose one of your children.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I'm difficult.
no, thank you for that. I think it's an interesting question to ponder on, but it's probably going to be very difficult to answer because I love eclecticism, you know? So that's what I enjoy about paganism in a way, because even the word itself and what it entails, it's eclectic in itself. So I love that that sit and practice and reflect on very different traditions and pantheons and whatnot. But if I had to, like, if you strap me on a chair and pointed weapons on my head, on my heart, and I had to make a choice, I don't know. It's probably Jewel. Like, I think due to exposure, maybe the Greek pantheon, but only because of exposure. Not only, but they teach it to us at school. So I was exposed to them at a very early age. Even from a storytelling perspective, at some point, whether it was a grandmother or an elderly person in the village that was supposed to entertain us with a story and whatnot, somebody at a very early age, again, somebody will introduce you to a myth of some kind, usually from the Greek pantheon. And I guess let's remember that the Roman pantheon, I mean, I have to get into more details and go deeper into the Roman pantheon, but I guess historically speaking, it did borrow a lot from the Greek pantheon. I don't want to take away its uniqueness, but historically there's also that to consider. But again, at the same time, close to my heart in recent years at least, I felt closer to the Celtic pantheon. Not difficulty, but the challenge, if you will, with the Celtic pantheon is that unlike the Greek pantheon, we know a bit less. There's beautiful myths, beautiful legends, but there's definitely less recorded history of that pantheon, and it's probably less mainstreamed than the Greek pantheon is. So it's a very niche pantheon, I would say. Definitely not niche when you happen to live in the UK, you know, especially maybe in Ireland. It would become like second nature. Like you probably get exposed to it at a very young age again. But I wasn't exposed to it when I was little, back in Italy, I suppose. So yeah, I would go with the Celtic pantheon because that's what's been the most, the one that I resonated with the most in the last few years. Bearing in mind that even though it's the one that I resonated with the most, it's still the one that I still don't know everything about. And I say that almost proudly, you know, meaning that I still want to explore them. I still want to journey with them. I need to learn about many, many details of their origins. and how they influence the history of the country itself and the local villages and whatnot. So, because that's another interesting part of the Celtic tradition when you live in the UK, wherever you go to travel somewhere, you need to find the people that know about this kind of stuff, I suppose. But chances are that a pub, maybe even a church, or some buildings, or some monuments around the villages, they have some historical connection to that Celtic root background. And again, the Celtic, what I find fascinating about that pantheon, how do you put it into words? I think the Greek pantheon, which I love dearly, it sometimes can come across as a bit of a soap opera. There's so much
Yes.
cosmic drama,
Yeah.
all the intercourse and all the questionable actions that we don't need to stay here and judge. But in the Celtic pantheon, there is still drama, I suppose, but there is also this sense of quests for courageous adventures and fulfilling an amazing life when you display virtue and cavalry inclinations and whatnot. Like it's not the same necessarily, but I see the Arthurian legends as distant cousins of the Celtic legends. And I love the mysticism around them, like the truth of the universe. I feel like the Greek pantheon, it's somewhat more inclined in a mix of actions, words, and choices that cause almost like a avalanche of consequences. And the Celtic pantheon has more of this. It's a bit more like the Lord of the Rings. In fact, like they say that Tolkien took a lot of inspiration from the Children of Danu when creating the Lord of the Rings, and I like that epic fantasy level, I suppose. So it would be difficult to go between one or the other. The Greek one I love fondly. There's so many beautiful myths to represent many aspects of life, and I've been exposed to it for the longest period of time. But with the Celtic one, there's been a more recent and more attuned resonance, and somehow I feel that's the pantheon that drew me here. Maybe subconsciously, maybe at the time I didn't know. But you wonder, like, is it a coincidence that you are where you are right now? Like, even I know that this is focusing on me and nobody else, but even for Lynn being where she is with the Norse pantheon and whatnot, I wonder, like, have I been led here by those deities that I'm falling in love with? And even though I didn't know them as much before, that I say that they are the one that have been sending out the call to come all the way here and discover things about them and discover things about me.
Yeah, thanks. Like I find it's like for me, because I also have like, well, definitely some entanglements with the Greek pantheon. For like the way that I experience like that now when you were talking, it just like occurred to me that I sense like for me personally, like the Greek, if you're thinking elements, are more like fire, air elements, while like the Celtic ones and maybe also Norse, but much more like earth and water
Yes.
feeling. So I feel like you're having like different because there's a different sensation to certain pantheons. So and that kind of balances each other out. So I'm like, makes sense you would go for either side, like both sides. But
Yeah.
speaking of gods and spirits and the such, I was wondering, like, also in your practice, if you ever these phases where you feel like you disconnect somehow, or life comes in and something happens and you're a bit more disconnected or further away from your gods and your spirits, and if and when that happens, what you do to reconnect to them, if there's anything particular that like gets you back or grounds you also.
That's a good question. I definitely do go through phases like that. I think I have been going through that very phase recently, in the last few months, because life has been so chaotic in good ways and in not so good ways. But because I think there's a part of me, at least at this stage of life, at the present moment, that wants to display utter devotion and wants to dedicate every waking moment of myself to the practice and to the journey, to the craft. But obviously, there's not enough hours and there is not enough energy in one's body to do that outside of the mundane living. And because you're always catching up on yourself, with yourself, whether it's the mundane duties like regular job, whether it's the house chores, whether it's the admin, or even like the social life, wanting to connect with friends and family and whatnot. Good things, but ultimately also things that take away the time that I wish I could dedicate more to the deities and the craft. So I think I'm still trying to find a solution to that. I'm trying to be as gracious and kind as possible to myself first and foremost, because that can be very much my biggest worst enemy, I suppose, and we all can be that, isn't it?
Mm.
But I also sign up to the belief that the applications may sometimes be lacking. So say that I had a routine where I was doing something every single day, but the routine now got disrupted, and now there's 1 or 2 days or 3 days versus the 7 days. I like to think that maybe that's also the principle of the animists, isn't it? That because they're always there, you may not be able to see visually, but you're always able to sense, and you're always able to apply your power of belief. So through me believing that they're always there, even if I'm not dedicating myself to a ritual or a function every single day, I trust that they're always there. But I do notice that the lack of that ritual, the lack of that function, diminishes my abilities to perceive, because I notice it's almost like a gym. It's almost like going to the gym. So
Yeah.
when I
It's like
had
a
that
muscle memory,
constant,
isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. So when I had that constant ritual, it's almost as if connecting to the realm feels like don't even have to think about it. But if
Yeah.
that practice is not there on a daily basis, I notice that it takes me more effort to be like, what am I sensing? What am I getting? What is this? And I guess like what I try to do, I try to make a change as best as possible. That's why I went on holiday last week. I needed time to disconnect from the mundane and the routine so that I could reconnect to the craft and to the deities and to the guardians and whatnot. And I simply, what's the verb? I convene with them, like almost having a tea party. There's always need for a candle being lit, for certain. Usually there's always a need for music in the background, because I think music is a really powerful tool for channeling.
Yeah.
Because of my watery nature, I had to be in the water, by the water. So that's why I went to an island where I had access to the sea. And yeah, like that gave me like the fresh start. That gave me the return that I was in need for the last few weeks. Obviously, I can't rely on a trip to an island every single time that I go through a disruption of routine. So I need to come up with new methods, new strategies, I suppose. But I think some people wiser than me will say mind over matter. So if I exercise my will a bit further, and if I when I say don't make excuses, I simply mean that if I try to let myself be perceived more powerful than what's blocking me, then I think I will experience less disruptions. But it's a practice in itself, because quite often whatever happens always feels bigger than myself, and I think that's very human. But yeah, the journey to the island that I've done last week definitely helped me reconnect. And now, first day back to routine. I consider this conversation with us as our sacred group, part of the discipline, part of the practice of the craft in some form, because I think there is magic in what we do. And now I just have to keep it up tomorrow, the day
Yes.
after, and every day going
Forever.
forward.
Well, that
Super.
is, yeah, I think all of us, we can relate to that because we have like a life, some have children or jobs and things like that that we had to work around. And yes, you talk about the passion that you need in order to pursue your spirituality and to work on that, and the desire to go deeper than that, confronting with the daily life. But my question for you, it would be more related to something that I profoundly admire on you, is your passion for tarot and your desire. And when you teach tarot, we can see that love, that devotion, that dedication. I don't know how many books you have read about tarot, where you get the time to learn so much about tarot is incredible. So my question it would be more, what is the passion or what is the thing that you found in tarot that respond to that desire or that helping you like a tool to go deeper into your spirituality? How do you use tarot for enrich that passion that you have?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you, Adriana. the words will be lacking for certain, because it's how do you explain something that feels so natural and so part embodied in myself, almost like DNA. But the thing is, I didn't discover tarot in 2020, so that statement in itself doesn't make sense, because how I didn't have that awareness. I had three main passions in my life. One of them being Disney when I was little, two of them, second of them being acting and the theater. And then obviously Disney is always in the background providing entertainment. Acting, it's still a passion that exists, but I don't chase after it, or I don't try to pursue it as a professional endeavor anymore. But it was a tricky one, because it was a deep passion. There were so many challenges in the middle to make it a professional career, a professional endeavor. And I thought after that, there couldn't possibly be anything else. It was a bit of a dark moment, because I thought once you close this door, there will never be another door that opens that will offer you fulfillment. There wouldn't. And I was happy to be proven wrong, because then Taro walked in and there were aspects of theater in it, especially if we look at the history of Pixie, of Pamela Coleman Smith. But then also that connected to the thread of childhood, which, yes, I explained it was through Disney, but by extension through magic. So one of my favorite pastimes was to be read fairy tales and stories. Well, when I was little, from my dad, and then obviously from either the teachers that were entertaining you in nursery and kindergarten, and then to local fairs and whatnot. There's something beautiful about storytelling, which connects to Disney, that connects to tarot, and connects to acting. And also, I was maybe it's the rising Pisces in me, but I was fairly naive. I always been fairly naive as an individual. And I believed in magic with a core, with a passion, ever since I was like probably 12 or 13. And then that's the age when you start getting into your teenage years, and people start making fun of you a bit more, and you start doubting things and questioning things and whatnot. But tarot rekindled that passion for magic, because it showed, through the images and through the language of symbolism, it kind of showed that magic exists in the simplest of forms, and it's found everywhere. It's found in a hello. It's found when you wake up in the morning. It's found when you sip a drink of water. I'm making it very simple in this regard. I think magic can also be very massive and grand and epic and whatnot. But I think tarot was the reintroduction to the foundations of magic by exploring archetypes and allowing you to get to know yourself and putting a new spin through the to know thyself. That saying, like he or she who know thyself has unlocked the secret of eternity and whatnot.
Yes.
So it's almost like a never-ending source of curiosity, because similar to the Celtic pantheon, I suppose, the tarot as well is equally as ancient. And there is a lot of speculation that we cannot physically prove, but we can ponder on, we can hypothesize. And I like that aspect. I like that there is no certain stamp of approval, like you can offer any other explanation other than this. I like that there can be multiple explanations, because that feeds into the curiosity, and it entertains me a bit more, I suppose.
So it has evolved. That passion you have has helped you to evolve in the connection with the cards and the meaning of the cards. Is the same passion when you read for yourself and you read for somebody else? So it fascinates.
I think the excitement is probably bigger when I read for myself.
Okay.
And maybe that's the Piscean nature in me as well, because I'm not afraid to take myself to many places. Whether if I read for somebody else, I always feel a bit of hesitation. I feel like I don't want to. I'll talk to you about where we could go, but I don't want to feel you pressured. I don't want you to feel pressured that you have to come along. And I don't know if you will come along. So far, I haven't really encountered the individuals that definitely went like, please, let's go there. There have been people that have been like, that looks pretty. What is it? No. I'm just asking. That looks kind of pretty, but I'll just watch from here. Like, I'll watch you go ahead first. And I don't mind going ahead first in that world. And that's why sometimes I feel like it's bigger enjoyment when it comes to reading for me. Still a lot of enjoyment, but not as gigantic, I suppose, when reading for someone else. Because it feels like a very personal experience, tarot as well, as they teach it to us, isn't it? So sometimes it feels like a big honor as well as a big responsibility to have to pin through somebody else's life and past and background and light as well as shadow and whatnot. So it feels safer, for lack of better words, to do it with me because I know my history, I know my boundaries, I know my limits, if I have any. Whether with people, it's a very more involved process, and it would require a number of sessions versus the one-off sessions that usually happen with readings, isn't it? For the purpose of commercial reading as its structure. Like you see somebody once, maybe you see them in a few months, but to make the most of that beautiful journey that tarot is and the gifts that tarot offers, it will need to be like a structure, consistent, somewhat repetitive sequence for a period of time to make it as amazing for me to do it with somebody else, I think.
Thank you, Luigi.
Like an appointment, like an appointment session you would have with a
Yeah.
therapist. Basically, that's what it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly. Like it's a psychic therapy.
Exactly. It is,
Yeah.
right, in a way. And
I
that
think-
kind of brings me to like my next question, which kind of goes hand in hand because I know that there's people out there that are very curious when it comes to like tarot because you've been reading tarot in like festivals and things like that. So my question was, how did you get your gigs, and what was the first gig that you let? Is that what we call it? A gig?
Yeah, we can call it a
But like,
gig.
yeah, I think it will be interesting to like see how you, like, the first time you went to like a festival and read, because it must be so different as well because you're in a place of, you know, you're probably there for like a few hours and there's a lot of different people, so it will be just interesting to know.
Definitely. So, because I got stellium in Aquarius, well, not in Aquarius, I got it in the 11th house. So I think a lot of the things that happen in my life happen because of the influence of somebody else. Like that's technically one of the ways that you can interpret my stellium in the 11th house. And what happened was, I was working my regular mundane job, and I had a colleague of mine working with me, and we worked very like the same shifts basically. So it was always the two of us. And I introduced him to the cards, but we were kind of not bored, but you know, we had a bit of a breather. We both were talking about life. They seem very open as well to the realm of imagination and whatnot. So I asked them if they wanted a reading back then, and I gave them a reading, and they got very curious about the cards, and then we went together to buy a deck for them in central London, and then I made some suggestions, book recommendations, gave a few inputs, etc. But also this friend and colleague, eventually they also had another job somewhere else in East London, and they were creating an event with queer artists coming together to run a market for a weekend once each 2 months or something like that. And they reached out to me saying, would you like to come along and have your store being about readings? So they were the ones that gave me my first gig opportunity. And I remember the difference between the gig that I did then versus the gigs that I'm doing now, as in the way that I presented myself. So that time, it was also much closer to home, so it was easier. But I was carrying with me crystals, dozens of decks, candles, altar decorations that I have here in my altar, but you know, I also packed them and carried them with me there. I created a whole presentation and I was so overzealous. But then I realized how unpractical that was because the carrying it, the packing it. So right now, if I do a gig, I'll only show up with my cloth, maybe a crystal, but mostly my deck, and let the rest of it be it. I can probably put more effort in looking the part and whatnot, but you know, it really depends on the gig itself, because if you are in a corporate environment with so many different people, I don't know, like I would say not why bother, but I would say that because it's such a busy and fast environment, the people that will come to me and will come to find me, they were meant to come and find me, whether or not I was dressed up in a certain manner or not.
Yeah.
If I was in an environment that was more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Chillaxed a little bit. Maybe there will be more reasons and more opportunities and more availability to make it really special and make it really curated. But yeah, this friend of mine gave me my first gig, And obviously, every time you do a gig, you try to do some networking in some way or another. Like, here's my Instagram, here's my email address. And other gigs came along. It's always about being open to the possibility that there might be an opportunity out there, and ask questions like, "Oh, do you know of any other events like this?" Actually, now that you say, there is this other one in the Christmas period. It just takes on from there. They don't come always as often as you wish they would, but when they do, you count yourself. Yay! Excitement. So yeah, that was the first one, but it's always been through the environment. It's always been through the effect of my 11th house stellium. I was.
It's like, I was just thinking, like, when you're good enough, you don't need all the bling. And you're just like presence, and you just have the things you need. You don't have to attract lots of bling. But lots of bling is also cool.
We know this from watching Battle of Fates. I think
And
that's
that
something.
also, I was thinking of that too. But some people have a lot of stuff, and then it's quite impressive, and then some people just have nothing, and they're like just blowing you away with their skills only. Yeah, I will just jump because we're just talking about tarot right now, so I will just jump to a tarot question that I have, and that is more directed at what feel the benefit is of tarot for the collective conscious and the good of humanity.
Thank you for that. And it's a big question, and I probably will not do the answer justice, but I think, and this is connected somewhat to the Celtic beliefs and Pantheon in a way, but I think tarot, if one dives in, almost like if you were to go and embrace the unknown of the ocean, but you just go in and swim, trust in your abilities to swim, etc. I feel like if you give yourself to tarot and you're allowed to take it where it can take you, you almost will not recognize the person that you were before you discovered tarot. There is a definite shift. And I do believe that because it speaks through the language of archetypes, of symbolism, and Paulo Coelho, the amazing writer, he would call it the language of the universe. Because it speaks that language, I think it brings individuals, no matter the background, no matter the circumstance, it brings them back to the very first law of the universe or life, which I like to claim it to be love, like the biggest, the center, the beginning and the end of everything. Obviously, the four of us may know more about that than other people that might or might not be listening, but there are several indications of that through the tarot, particularly in the sequence of the majors, of this sacred law, of this sacred word, of this emotion, spiritual experience, state of consciousness, but that is summarized in that English four-letter word, love. And is the source of inspiration of films and songs and poetry. I know that it sounds sugarly or not, but I don't intend it to be just like rose cheeks, nothing bad ever happens, everybody lives happily ever after. Intend it as the principle of simply caring for each other as well as we care for ourselves, and nurturing each other as well as we nurture ourselves, and understanding that was the principle of being alive to an extent. Like that was the scope. Everything else that we are experiencing and that came, I know it's a bit of a drastic, dramatic put on life, but everything else that came after is just something that came as an aftermath of what was developed after years and years on evolution. Good aspects of evolution, but also bad aspects of evolution, aspects that drew us away or took us further and further away from our roots and our ideology, our pure ideology. When I say pure, I don't mean that there is no shadow. I simply mean that I think nowadays we live in an environment and a society that it's almost like the law of the jungle or whatnot, or the law of the ocean, like big fish eats small fish and whatnot. And I definitely don't believe that's the message of the tarot. I definitely don't believe that's the message of the universe or the deities that have created the threads of life and whatnot. I think, again, it goes back to that question that Adriana asked about passion. We were given the opportunity to walk and breathe and grow so that we could fulfill our passions. And tarot is the key to open the door so that you can see the visual of that passion and see what is the blueprint of that passion and what is the tool belt for that passion that you need to wear. And through the fulfillment of that passion, which is rooted in love, you can live the most beautiful life. or anyone, ideally. That's the ideology, that's the belief, that's the idea, that's the theory. And that's what I think tarot affects us consciously. So if everybody, because obviously, unfortunately, tarot is still covered in stigma and superstition. There are some fancy aspect about that, like it offers entertainment, it offers a bit of mystique. But if somebody was to lay down the curtain and the veil, which could be, you can say, dangerous depending on the individuals that chooses to walk through the veil. But let's say that everybody deserves an equal and equitable chance to walk through the veil and to, or at least see through the veil. Think of the benefits, think of the wonders that each individual will be able to achieve in their own lives and ultimately, hopefully, by extension, in the lives of others. So I know it's not very concrete the way that I described it, but it's basically that.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Luigi. Yeah.
So it's love,
Thank you for that.
love and love
Yeah.
and love. Yeah, but
Yeah.
well, talking about
Yeah.
love, about you talk about deities and the pantheons of different cultures, traditions and cultures and so on. So, but I wonder, what is your belief or what is the thing that you feel regarding spirituality and organized religion? What is the thing, do you think there is a difference between spirituality and religion? And if you believe in different realms or different cultures that is considered different religions, how you associate or integrate everything in yourself? Do you feel do you follow a religion?
Good question. So I obviously was born in Italy and baptized, so you can't say that I was born or at least raised Christian and possibly Catholic. I say possibly purely because I don't recognize myself in those terms and in those faiths or religions. But I do think there is a fair difference between a religion and a spirit, the religion and spirituality. And I think the core aspect of it is that, again, the freedom and the eclecticism and the flexibility and the dexterity of it all. So I think to an extent, what defines religion is a set amount of scriptures, rules, observations, like things that you can ponder on, but you don't necessarily question, depending on the tradition, I guess. I think there are some religions that invite dialogue, but if I can speak for the Catholic faith that I was raised in, I don't think that was the environment. I think the environment was, this is it. To question it is to be mean and whatnot. So obviously you can see that I'm speaking from a traumatic Catholic Christian experience, which is probably the case for a lot of people, including a lot of queer people and, and people that belong to the rainbow. But yeah, so I think like in religion, there are those limits, there are those fixed ideologies, if you will. And I think in spirituality, there is effervescence. Is that a word?
Yeah.
It's almost like you can't quantify, you can't specify, but you can feel, you can perceive. It's basically what attracts me to tarot to an extent as well. Like, obviously, you have the images of the cards, which come in many forms and colors and designs, especially in this century. But ultimately, on top of that, you have the channeling that comes with it. So it's multitasking, it's multi-form, etc. So yeah, I think if I were to say to someone where my legions lie, it's probably more towards spirituality than religion. I don't think religion doesn't need to be a horrible or evil thing, depending on how you use it. But I think, unfortunately, with the society that as it is right now, religion as it presents itself right now, it has not been useful in the slightest, and it hasn't been for several thousands of years. Like it's only caused exactly. So division, that's what, in my view and in my experience and in what I can observe, at least in the world and in the globe and whatnot, I only see the religion causing division, but you can stretch that and say that it's the people that are causing the division. That being said, I never found, even like in let's go to spirituality a little bit, like there is the Wiccan tradition and the Wiccan faith, which is part of the neo-pagan movement and world. But you can count technically, because the Wiccans do follow certain rules, certain observations, like we mentioned before. So you can count the Wiccan faith almost as a religion. I would say almost only because I don't want to put a definite to it, but there are several people that determine, Wiccan is a religion, and that's fine. But even then, when somebody was trying to say, would you like to become a Wiccan? I was almost like hesitant, like, I don't know, like I like the idea that I can go east on Monday and west on Tuesday and south on Friday and then the other way around the week after. Like, I like that idea. I don't think I necessarily like the idea of a set wall either around me or in front of me or beside me or behind me, or all of them included. But that being said, I do practice a lot of Wiccan principles and I love studying it and observing it and talking to Wiccan people as well. Like, there's a huge community here in London, which I'm grateful for. So it's always nice to have a conversation. I think in spirituality and in the freedom of spirituality, meaning the choice to explore and the choice to determine and the choice to find out for yourself and by yourself sometimes, I guess. I find that more attractive and more in line with my heart than the term religion. But I hope the religion does wonderful things for other people. All my blessings to them.
Blessings, Godspeed. I guess go back to the tarot, because for us, I think you are the tarot guru, just like Adriana said. But how do you see like tarot in your everyday life? How do you see like the symbolism? Do you use tarot every day? Or just
That I do. Even thank you for that question. But it's beautiful because even when I mentioned that the rituals might be lacking, and I guess I should not quantify, I should specify what do I mean by ritual, because does the ritual need to be a big thing? It can be, and I like for it to be. I love big rituals. I love big detailed things. And that's what I struggle to keep up with. But the small things I don't. So every day I will work with, I have too many calendars, basically. I have a lunar calendar, I have a Gregorian calendar, I have an astrological calendar, and I have a weekly
You have a
calendar.
Google calendar. You have a Google
I have a
calendar.
Google calendar. But the calendars that I mentioned at the beginning, they're all tarot calendars that I keep. And I keep doing lots of meditations and journaling on the connections between them. And I always get mesmerized whenever I do a ritual and a message from one calendar turns up in this calendar, like showcasing themselves as speaking. They speak and they are there, alive and moving. I say that to say because every single day, especially on a working day when I need a lot of support and protection from the guardians and the ancestors, I will always draw a card on top. Well, not on top. I will always have a weekly guardian with me, and that weekly guardian I will check in before I leave the house or before I get to work, and that will be represented by a card. And then there will be additional revelation based on the numerology present in the draw. That's too detailed to explain here and now. But basically, yes, it's giving me a mantra or a piece of advice, an element of inspiration and or protection simply to go through the day. I talk about it like every single day I'm risking my life. I'm not, but when you are in a world like the world that we are in now, especially in a city so chaotic like London, you can always use an extra layer of protection, I think. I like to think, I like to say. So there's always that daily ritual. And that's why I was like, is that a ritual? I think it is. It's a small ritual, but I think it counts as a ritual. And so I take observation of the week ahead and the day ahead. So I know that by this week, I'll have to work with this force, with this energy, with this archetype. And I try to recognize it when I go out in conversations that I had with people, in events that happened to me. So like, let's say that I missed the bus, for example, something very basic, but the archetype that I drew, like maybe the Five of Cups, for example, what would that be in that situation? Like, the disappointment of having lost the bus, but also now the requirement of figuring out a new route and not allowing yourself to sink and freeze due to the event, I suppose. Because the Five of Cups is ruling that week, I might be paying extra attention on what conversations come up and how I initiate conversation. Because maybe the Five of Cups is trying to tell me that people are in a sensitive state at the minute. And I should be more caring towards them, caring towards myself. It's things like that. So it's recognizing them in the simplest of things, even in the food that you eat sometimes, which gets interesting, which is a very it's a very ceremonial magician kind of practice as well. Like one of the first rites of initiation is to be able to recognize the elements and observe the elements through a certain period of time in every single aspects of everyday life. And it's challenging. It's challenging because I think we distract ourselves very easily. I distract myself very easily. And it takes a lot of concentration to be like, there he is again. Oh, this was it. Or if you're faced with a challenge, and I use the work environment again, say that your boss wants to talk to you, like, I had to talk to you about something very sensitive, and your heart is palpitating and he's running at the speed of light, and he's like, this is it. This is the day that I get kicked out. But then you're like remembering how the card will react, and that in the past, knock on wood, luckily I have wood in front of me for those that don't believe, but in the past, that has saved my ass multiple times. Like in moments where I thought I would break down specifically, or maybe even tear up, or not know how to recognize the wood from the tree. That practice, seeing the tarot in life and understanding how the tarot will react to a situation, especially a challenging situation, that almost, forgive me the dramatic term, but that basically very much saved me in that situation, in those situations.
That's, yeah, a whole new aspect of tarot that worth exploring.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, because I think that people has to have free will. I don't know. The idea for me to someone depending on the daily day of what the cards want to tell you, I don't know. To me, it's a difficult one. But it's my personal opinion, obviously. You know, I'm a rebel.
Yeah, of
I don't
course.
like. I don't like things to put me in a path. I have to behave, or I have to look in the pattern, or the thing like that. For me, that is a quite difficult one. That is my opinion.
Yeah. And I might not have explained it properly, but it's less of a restriction, and it's more of an invitation to analyze environment, individuals, and circumstances, so that you can basically collect different ingredients and different pieces of knowledge that you can add to the experience of the card, and you can use that to enrich your readings as well. And that's what also allows you to expand on the bibliography of the card, if you will. There's still several people that read and write about tarot, but mostly based on how they personally experience the tarot. So it's mostly about that. It's almost like an investigation, but it's a fun investigation, I would say. And also, because we explore passion during this conversation, one of the aspects of passion could be not addiction necessarily, but dependence, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like something that you love so much that I dedicate every breathing moment to it. And that's something that I definitely tread on very often when I get passionate about something. And that could be the Piscean nature again.
And the
Also
Italian
my
one.
card of the day.
And that card and the pen.
Also, I feel like for people who don't like this kind of premonition thing, or don't want to have like a card before something happens, it can be a really nice practice to draw cards at the end of the day, and then, or the end of something, and then reflect on it and reflect through like, okay, how did this card or how did this archetype show up today, and what did I learn? So that I think that can work quite well if the mind plays tricks and doesn't like that thing that you get stuck on something, but rather reflect backwards. I have another. So you kind of talk. I'm going to bring you back a bit away from tarot again, and but you mentioned that you were raised Catholic, and that's your upbringing, and there's a lot of trauma, and I'm not going to ask you to uncover your trauma necessarily. So you've already said how you are raised, and I'm just curious about how you also mentioned the stories, that there were always like stories in Italy about the myths of the Pantheon, but was there like a trigger point, or what happened? What made you pagan, basically? Like what? Yes, that's the question, I guess. What happened? What brought you to paganism? What was like the biggest trigger point?
I think I might have pointed this out before, but I swear to you, it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That evil queen that was able to, obviously she was doing horrible things, but there was some fascination to what she was doing. Like she was the most interesting character in that film.
Yeah.
She was the only reason to tune up to that film to an extent. No disrespect to the film, but you know what I mean. Like, and she is the first character that appears in the film. When the film starts, it doesn't start with Snow White; it starts with her. And the things that she was able to do, like from talking to the mirror to transforming herself to this dark dungeon that you go down and grab books and make potions. That was just one example. But then following on the fairy tales that were told to me as a child, the idea that magic could change your life. It could grant somebody the possibility to attend the ball. It could grant somebody the possibility to earn fame and fortune. It could basically make all of your dreams come true. So you felt like, oh, so you need magic basically to make a dream happen, make a dream come true. And obviously, as a child, you see that with the golden eyes. You see that like, oh wow, think of all the things that I can wish for and that can become true only if I get access to some pixie dust and whatnot. So I think it was mostly the childlike fairyland belief or mindset, and magic made everything more interesting. I remember as well as a 3-year-old, I remember Nightmare Before Christmas. I remember all these ghosts and I remember all these monsters and these witches. Everything about them was different. Everything about them was like nothing that you see every day. And that attracted me. That made me feel drawn. It was magnetic, it was not there was an element of forbiddenness to it. But that forbiddenness only came afterwards. It simply came as why is nobody looking at over here? Because a lot of people were more into, especially boys of my age, were more into Pokemon and Hot Wheels and whatnot.
Yes.
But nobody was looking in that direction. I guess I felt almost honored that I was the only one looking in that direction. I was like, have I discovered something that nobody else has ever seen before? Which is not true. Like plenty of people were into it, just not in my circle. But you can imagine like at that young age, to be the only one there in that environment, you feel like, oh wow, I discovered gold, I discovered silver, I discovered hot water. It was to that extent. So yeah, I think it's that if I chose to believe, which I did when I was little, that magic could change your life, that's what attracted me to it the most. And that's what I guess fed me hope, resilience. Yeah, and I guess other kind of not just virtues, but also some flaws, like, a lot of naivety, a lot of gullibility. It was very easy to pull a prank on me, and it still is to this day. Yeah, so I think it's that early exposure to fairy tales again and the storytelling aspect, the seed of it.
Yeah, so the attraction to
magic.
witchcraft and magic. And then where is magic and witchcraft? In paganism. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I promise I'm not going to prank you. I don't know how. Anyway. It's very interesting that you talk about the relationship with magic. What do you consider yourself a magician? What it entails to be a magician? Do you do potions? Do you do spells? Do you do anything like that? Are you a sorcerer? How do you define yourself, if you define yourself, or is you think that is like a force or from the spiritual guides that come through you and work around what you consider magic, or is your higher self or your archetypal that is the magician? What entails to be a magician in the life of Luigi in the 20th?
Oh boy. So I think if I was to define myself, I would still, and probably for a long period of time, I will identify myself still as a witch, because I simply love that word. Yeah. And I think that it's the word that goes beyond gender, obviously. And there's been several discussions about it for many years now. But I love the word of it. I love the archetype of it. I love the sound of it, especially in Italian. I miss the Italian word of it.
Which one it is, that one? Brujo.
Strega. Strega. Bruja.
Bruja would be the Spanish one, I think.
Yeah, brujo.
Yes,
brujo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Striega.
So
So what is the
I think
meaning? What is the entailment? What is why you consider yourself a magician or, I'm sorry, a witch?
I think it's because of I am attracted to witches whenever I see them in the fictional realm and whenever I encounter them in the real realm. So when they ask you like, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it's for a long period of time. And I've been thinking of, I want to be a witch. That looks so awesome. That feels so awesome. And I think it just simply entails, in my case at least, working to get into, it's multiple things. So it's a bit multi-layered, but definitely getting to know myself more and getting to know myself further. So the good and the bad, I suppose. I think also there's two other things that are the core aspects. especially in my case. One thing is getting to understand your power, meaning that I guess it's difficult to have this conversation in my body because obviously I am in the body of a man versus the body of a woman, but all the witches that are in women's body, for instance, and we know that we talked about this last time, we live in a patriarchal system and society that pushes the women to the edges. I'm not going to speak about that experience because I live in the body that I live in, but as an individual that has his own mental health struggles and journeys and issues and difficulties to gain self-confidence and develop and maintain self-confidence, I think that's about it. Like discovering in this case, my own power, despite the past that I had, the challenges that I had, the difficult moments that I had, the flaws that I have and have, maybe I will have. And so working towards inner power that then gets translated into external power. And that power translates into the third discipline or principle or goal, which would be to, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's the only word that I can think of, manipulate. And when I mean manipulate, it simply means being able to manipulate aspects of life to your will, but for the benefit of things that are for the highest of all good, whether it's your own good or the good of others. Ideally, one benefits the other. And that opens another can of worms because there are so many conversations and debates about witches and witchcraft that purely focuses on good purposes or goodwill purposes versus
The black
shadowy
magic and so
purposes
on,
and
yeah.
dark purposes. Yeah, but obviously that's probably something, that's a debate in itself. I simply view it as you as an individual, even if you sign up to witchcraft or not, you are likely to encounter obstacles and challenges. That's just the way that it goes in this society, in this system that we created. The archetype of the witch is the idea that despite those circumstances, despite those challenges, through knowing yourself, which was the first goal, principle, and whatnot, again, knowing yourself in and out and deeper, first and foremost, you then unlock and embody and develop the power. And that power translates into the ability of manifesting and creating and bending and blending and mixing and metamorphosis and whatnot, which you can take to a metaphorical field or also very much real physical field. So intentions and wishes and again, that word again, true higher will. Yeah, so that usually, in my case, especially through my studies, it goes through the archetypes of the elements, the archetypes of the tarot, the archetypes of the stars, the archetypes of the planets, and by extension, through the guidance and the supervision of the ancestors and the guardians and the deities. And that's just my way to approach it, I suppose.
Okay, and to finish, sorry, do you think you had been a witch in previous lifetimes, or you have been always a witch? Or how do you feel that? Why? Because it's fascinating that you arrive at very young age to consider yourself a witch, having the wisdom to consider yourself a witch.
That's I guess because we live in the age of Aquarius now. Who knows? But it's interesting. I don't know. I like to think so. But if I were to give you an honest answer, I'm not sure. I still have to do a lot of work on past lives and lots of connections. I like to think that I have some involvement, but I don't know for certain if I had the title or the goal or the mission or the destiny that I have in this current lifetime. Because that's something that I want to explore a bit further. I think I definitely had no ordinary not occupation necessarily, but I had no ordinary mission or destiny. I think nothing happens by chance, I suppose. I believe in that, I suppose, to great extent. I don't know for certain whether I was who I was now before, or whether I was specifically a witch before. Maybe I was someone or something different, possibly. But I'm glad to be one in this lifetime.
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you.
Thank
My
you
pleasure.
for
Thank you.
answering all our questions
Without hesitation.
without hesitation.
Dive in.
Well, yes, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. That concludes our episode about Luigi the Witch. Like, subscribe, and comment if you will. And you can buy us a coffee if you like what we're doing.
I mean, actually, 4 coffees because there's 4 of us.
For 4 coffees, we can split one coffee. Well, thanks for tuning in, and catch you again in the next rabbit hole. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
We are the voices of the Occultinarium. Welcome to the rabbit holes.